We began looking into the virtues. We talked a little bit in our last session about the various virtues. What is a virtue? The cardinal virtues and the theological virtues. So we start this lesson talking about uh, one of the first of the cardinal virtues, which is the virtue of temperance. If you recall from uh, your previous material, the definition of temperance, the basic definition of temperance is right use and moderation of earthly goods, worldly goods. Uh, but to speak more clearly, more precisely about temperance, is that practicing the virtue of temperance inclines us to desire and to enjoy the pleasures of this world well and rightly well. Properly speaking, we can speak about the most basic pleasures: food, drink, sleep, sex. Um, More broadly, though, we can speak about the desires that entail our immediate bodily longing. So this may be more than just the most basic urges or passions, as it were. And it may be a little bit broader, maybe a little bit deeper. Temperance is concerned with desiring all of these things in a reasonable or moderate manner. Why? Because we must balance these things. We cannot have it all. If we have too little of the things that we need, uh, we may be unable to act as we intend to or as we want to. Let's consider that. If we have too little of food, we're not able to be. Our bodies are not nourished, and we're not able to function as well as we should. However, if we have too much food, the same thing can happen. That our health can deteriorate because we are overwhelming our body with food to the point that, again, we cannot function as we should. We cannot pursue that which we desire. Uh, it is a balancing act. Um, in talking about this in more ancient terms, the philosopher Aristotle talked about the golden mean. That at times virtue is a golden mean. I mean, you can see it as kind of a balancing beam. Kind of you want things to be balanced appropriately, not too much or not too little, one way or the other. Virtue is often met in the middle, um, but that does not mean um, the same thing in every situation. That doesn't mean the same thing for every person. Let's consider each of our bodies are quite different. Um, my caloric needs are not the same as yours, same as someone else in the class, based on our build, based on our height, based on how much energy that we actually do use. All of those things um, make it hard to be able to say the absolute virtue. To set at what when that think about it. If you've ever read if you ever read the label, the nutrition label on food packages, whichever package, cans, cereal boxes, whatever, you see on there, it tells how many fats, carbs, calories. It gives you a percentage. It gives you a percentage daily value. That is how much of the percentage daily value you should have on what is based on a 2,000 calorie diet. Now, if you are one who does not use much energy, who is rather lethargic, lazy, in other words, you probably don't need 2,000 calories. However, consider the example of athletes. The extreme example I can think of was I remember reading stuff about Michael Phelps. Um, that because of how much energy he was using in swimming, in keeping his body not only at a good temperature, but also all the muscles that he was using. He during his Olympic regime, his regimen, I should say, um, that he would consume anywhere from 6 to 8,000 calories a day. Now, if you or I consumed that, that would be so excessive it would probably kill us by the end of the week. Yet, because of his body, of how much work his body was going through, that is actually temperate for him. So we can't give such a universal definition for how temperate one can be. To say that, in most things, in the basic things, we can't do that. In some things we can, and we'll see some examples in that. But this virtue must be exercised with prudence, which is the next virtue we'll talk about. Now, opposed to temperance, opposed kind of the vice against it is intemperance. This is where we do not do things rightly or moderately. Now, intemperance can be too much. We have an excessive amount, so we are grossly overeating, overdrinking, oversleeping. It can be too little as well. It can be we're not getting enough food, we're not getting enough drink, we're not getting enough sleep, we're not getting enough of this, that, and the other. So intemperance is when that golden mean in this specific example is being upended, it's being balanced. That instead of having the focal point, the wedge kind of right at the point where the weights balance, it's off kilter, so everything is upended. In talking about temperance, we must talk about it first in the context of balancing our intentions versus our desires or our feelings. Why is it important to talk about this? We as human beings are rational creatures, that we have reason, we have intellect. We are also willful creatures, that we have the will to be able to act, even at times against perhaps our instinctive nature. We also have emotions and feelings that can sway us, whether it is in whether it is happiness, sadness, anger, lethargy. Our feelings can often lead us into actions. And at times it can lead us to actions that go against our intentions. That we may, for example, we may say, well, my intention here, being at university, is to participate in this class, to get my degree, to go do my job. But we may have that feeling of, well, my friend called me, they're, it's Friday, it's a beautiful day outside. They want to go and they want to go see a movie, or something that we can do in these crazy times. Maybe go out to the park, if it's a nice warm day. Spring comes soon enough. So we may have this feeling of wanting to be with our friends, wanting to be with a good thing. We don't feel like going to class. Who does? But yet we still have our intention. Our intention is to do all this for some future goal, some future aim. But yet we want to satisfy the immediate aim, the immediate urge. So that emotion could lead us to skip class and to go with our friends somewhere, or to skip class and to get the immediate gratification that we want. Our emotional responses can also be judged morally. Why? Because they can form, they can shape or change our immediate intentions, our overall intentions. They can also um, they also greatly affect our actions. Um, they form us, they form who we are. In the Gospel of Mark, Jesus says, "From within the heart of men proceeds everything, everything sinful," in the specific case he's talking about there, or everything good. Uh, why? Our emotions can blur our reason and our will. Think of the last time that you were angry. How did it? Were you able to actually make a rational judgment on whatever was happening at that moment? Um, or did you act immediately, hastily, perhaps even imprudently? Um, last time you were sad, um, think perhaps about maybe a time when you were, maybe someone died in your life that was very close to you, family member, friend, um, companion of some sort. Um, were you really able to act in a reasonable, rational manner? Some people can, I'm not saying it's everybody, but some people are so overwhelmed with emotion at that point that they can't act, they can't decide. Their emotions are holding sway against their reason, and their will is just caught in the middle. We have to talk about and deal with emotions because they do have an effect on us, positively and negatively. And that is up to us, though. We are not purely, merely emotional creatures. We are rational creatures, primarily. We are also embodied spirits, and creatures have emotions. There's no denying it, right? We know animals have some sort of emotions. Um, you know, dogs and cats, more dogs. Sorry, cat people. More dogs have the great emotion of happiness with their owner, or sharing the sadness with the owner. Um, you know, animals feel frightened and they react in a specific way, the flight or fight response. We have emotions as well, but we also have reason, which they are meant to work together, but often they work, they can work in opposition, or in distinction. Um, in judging things that are moral, especially dealing with emotions, we have to judge that which we are responsible for, that which we are free to do. There's a kind of um, there's a sliding scale, as it were, that can be seen between, um, on one end, the deliberate decisions that are done, and on the other end, intuitive reflexes. That we can very much judge. We absolutely must judge morally deliberate decisions. We must judge these. These are absolutely judgeable. And what do I mean by that? To rule whether they are virtuous or vicious, whether they lead us to the good or they lead us away from the ultimate good. Intuitive reflexes are not judgeable. For example, um, the fact that you're breathing is basically this point in intuitive reflex. You do it automatically. If I jump, lunge at you, um, you might, you'll scale back. That's an intuitive reflex. You know, that's not judgeable, morally speaking, because you automatically do it. But in between, there's a kind of scale here. You know, some action may be kind of here, leaning more towards a reflex, but there's still some decision in there. Or an action may be something like this, closer to a decision, but still some reflex within there. You know, our emotions are not the primary thing that informs, shapes, and motivates our actions. It is our reason and our will. Um, so the old, give me a second here. So the pyramid, as it were, in more ancient understanding of the human person, is that, you know, the biggest, most important thing that shapes us is our will, and the ability to choose, the ability to decide for ourselves. Um, just kind of draw this. This is not going to be the prettiest pyramid, but this is not art class. So the will is at the top. But the will is founded on the reason and the intellect. But even the reason and the intellect are founded in some way on the emotions. But that there is there are exchanges and interchanges between all of these things. Our will, though, can shape all of that, but our will can be shaped. Our emotions can shape the others, but they can and in fact should be shaped by the others as well. Um, so we have to, in evaluating that, in evaluating our emotions and evaluating our feelings, we have to go first and foremost, do we sustain or encourage the emotion? You know, emotions are often felt without much without much thought immediately, but we can sustain it, we can encourage it, we can foment it. Do we place ourselves in an environment that elicits a predictable response? Often an emotion is a predictable response. If we see something bad happening, it more often than not causes us to be angry. If we see something good happening in front of us, it makes us happy. Do we place ourselves in that environment that is going to give us that predictable response? And also, do our beliefs, our thoughts, our ideas, do they influence our emotions? Do they shape and change what we think is important, right, good, true, wonderful? So, um, in balancing our emotions, you know, they are, you know, they must be held in check. You know, not all that glitters is gold. Not everything that satisfies us is actually good for us. There's a time for fasting. There's a time for feasting, as the passage in the scripture says. So, in evaluating temperance, we have to start within, not with the exterior good itself. You know, not with I'm using a computer, or I'm using an office, or I'm having something to drink, something to eat. What does it do for me interiorly? Am I too focused on the emotion that I receive from that action, from that thing, to be unable to act properly? Um, this is where we can start talking about, for example, addiction. Um, Addiction is where we are so focused on the emotional response that we get to something that it clouds, it makes it hard for us to operate our reason and our will, that we turn everything towards that. Um, those addicts, they want this psychological, psychedelic, emotional high, whether it's from a drug, whether it's from something that they receive in that thing. So it is then that they are so overwhelmed by their emotions that they can't act and think reasonably, rationally. Um, so temperance is to help balance that, to avoid that loss of reason, that loss in every way of being a human creature and becoming, in some ways, less than the beasts, less than the animals. Um, animals don't act in so emotional a manner that they get focused on everything. They act very intuitively, second nature. We, with being willful creatures, are different. We can choose what we want to do. Whether we let our emotions do that or not is the question. So, in thinking of all of this, we have to utilize prudence, and we'll talk about prudence the next section, next class, next section. But how do we develop um, temperance? How is it that we are able to um, how is it that we are able to engage in this practice? So there's a fourfold stage process of development. First is recognizing the state that we are currently in, that we are in a state of intemperance. And this is that we act in a vicious manner. We act out this vice that is automatic. It's just automatically done. Take the example of food. Let's say it's January. Some people are still trying to live out the typical New Year's resolution of eating less, eating healthier. Um, so what they have to first realize is they've been acting in a terrible way to eat terribly. So instead of eating their fruits and their vegetables, they're eating McDonald's, they're eating Big Macs, they're drinking lots of pop, they are eating too many snacks, um, and they do that automatically. So recognizing that you're in that period first, that you're in an automatic habit that is intemperate, that it is unbalanced. To begin to move into a period of incontinence. And in this context, incontinence is a recognition that I am practicing something poorly. I am living a vice and striving to overcome it, but making some gains, but still falling down. That think of it, those recovering perhaps from an addiction. Most people cannot, excuse me, most people cannot drop an addiction at the drop of a hat. They will start. Some of them will drop it. They'll last a couple weeks, maybe a couple months, and then engage in the action again. Fall back into the habit. Why? Because there's still the emotional tie to that previous intemperance, that vice. It is hard to change habits. We all know this. It is very hard to change habits. It can happen, but it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of willpower as well. That's where the reason and the will come in. The emotions tell us, well, I don't like this. I don't want this. And just the reason the will says, no, this needs to happen. And we need to rewrite our emotions in order to do it. So moving from intemperance to incontinence, that practicing it poorly, not avoiding it much more, but still falling into that vice more often than not. Moving from there into more of continence, that the vice is one has lost the um, the practice of the desire, but there is still the desire. So for the addict, One has gone perhaps a couple months, maybe 6 months to a year, is free of the habit, but there's still the urge, there's still the desire. Smokers, we'll talk about that. That they still have that desire to kind of put something there and light it up, to puff on it, even though that they've been out of the practice for a couple months, even maybe at times a couple years. One is progressing towards the full virtue. However, they are still, there is still deep within their psyche, their person, their emotions. There is still that, I know this can make me happy. I want it. I need to do it. I need to do it. The reason and the will still have great control to say no, 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 bad emotions, bad emotions. But the emotions are still there. They're still there. They're still kind of I believe a psychiatrist or psychologist talk about there's a need to rewire the brain if one wants to get rid of a bad habit or a bad, especially a bad addiction. You have to rewire the brain in part to be able that you don't desire that. But lastly, if you keep practicing, as you keep developing it, you do achieve and are able then to practice the virtue of temperance. That not only are you avoiding the vicious action, you're even avoiding having the vicious desire. That you have been so far removed from not only the last time that you did it, but the last time you even desired it. That you can sit there and go, how did I ever want to do this in the first place? Why would I ever think that was something good, something wonderful? So, this is how we develop this specific virtue. It can be formulated, it can be practiced in whatever thing, whether it's the basics, food, drink, sleep, whether it is something like money or goods, whether it is objects that you like or things that you like to do. Um, though temperance is concerned with the right use of good, this process also works for the practice of the other virtues. This development, it's most necessary to understand that in growing in temperance, because there's often that emotional response to exterior stimuli. So it is harder, it seems, to balance that. Hence why we need to talk about the emotions and why we talked about the emotions in dealing with this virtue. Now, however, we need to understand about the progress in the midst of that development. This, so how is it that we are able to develop that temperance, to go from intemperance to incontinence to continence to temperance? How are we able to do that? The first step that must be made is the realization. Alcoholics Anonymous makes this famous, that the first step must be that you admit that you are alcoholic, that you have a problem with alcohol. Only when you actually have that realization can anything change. There's a difference between perhaps knowing versus actually realizing. In one sense, we all know sometimes the things that we do are not good or not wrong, but we push that to the side. We push that away and we say, well, yeah, but I like it. It feels good. It's fine. It's okay. It's that realization of sitting there and going, no, this isn't fine. This isn't good. To be actually sit there and say that, so that then one can go, this is not where I want to be. I want to be up here. I want to be, at this level. I am way down here. If I want to get up there, I have to change. I have to improve. I have to do better. So, going from that realization, one must then stop the response. As I said before, most of temperance is dealing with our reaction to stimuli, external stimuli, especially in the form of things things of this world. So we have to stop that response from even happening. That is where we begin to reject the emotion and to act in a more willful manner, to say, this is what I need to do and I need to be, and I need to avoid this action anymore. But continuing that, we need to avoid the situation that leads into that. It's not just avoiding the response. It is far easier to avoid the situation. So if I am obese and I want to lose weight, it's not just stopping the response of maybe automatically eating things. I need to avoid situations where I'm going to practice that overeating. So that means I need to stop going to buffets, which in a certain sense, most of the COVID has, I think, helped to eliminate that. Or um, if I'm obese and I want to get healthy, I need to avoid, maybe I need to avoid spend time away from my chair or my recliner, or that spot where I go and do nothing, and I need to instead go somewhere else, do something else. So 2 and 3 can kind of go together, not only stopping the response but avoiding the situation that leads to it. Finally, we must change our perception of the situation. We must change and understand what it is we're supposed to do, what it is we need to do, and then to uh, to say, this is the good action I need to do. So this is what I should praise and desire, versus this. This does not lead me anywhere. I want to be healthy, or uh, I want to run a marathon, or X, Y, and Z. Whatever good that you're pursuing over here, but I'm over here. I'm lazy. I can't even go up the steps without breathing heavily. Um, A, B, and C over here. No, to change it to say, this is not what I desire. This is what I desire. They talk about that in the sense of cognitive manipulation or cognitive behavior therapy, whether one does that with somebody, or whether one just does that on one's own, to just sit there and go, no, that's not what I want. That's not what I desire. This is not good for me. It's this. It's all, and just that kind of repetition, repetition, repetition. Much of morality is improved through repetition. Whether they still praise that in schools or not, most of it happens through repetition. We need to repeat the good that we want us to do, to avoid repeating the bad we do not like to do. Um, so, um, but in these things, in all that this does, we are able then to um, practice and to grow in the virtue of temperance, to be able to use these things rightly and well. As far as Christian morality, things are not good or bad. This computer that I'm working on, the food I eat, the drink I have, the sleep I have. Most of these things, they are not good or evil in and of themselves. It is how we use them. Food is good if I use it rightly. Drink is good if I use it rightly. The computer is good if I use it rightly. If I do not use it towards the good, I make it evil. I make it a lesser good. So, if the ultimate good in Christianity is to pursue God, then the computer is here to help me do what I need to do that ultimately helps me to know God, to love Him, and to serve Him in and of Himself and through others. Hence, you know, why I'm using this computer to record this class. But if I use this computer to avoid my duties, to avoid what I need to do, then it's not the computer itself that's the problem. That's like people say, oh, the internet is the greatest mistake. Um, in some ways, yes, but in some ways, no. It's not the internet's fault. It is our fault because we are intemperate and we misuse it. Whether we overindulge in social media, whether we overindulge in entertainment, whatever it may be, it is because we allow that to happen. We give our emotions full sway, and thus it is hard to overcome all of that. So, reflect on that. And even if you want to, depending on when you're watching this, you can reflect on that in your first, what's it called? In your first piece on um, reflecting on your morality. I couldn't think of it for a second. Um, you know, are there things that you feel are intemperate? And you don't have to tell me. Once I don't need to know. You need to answer that for yourself. Well, this time of year, normally people have made resolutions or whatnot. We don't have to do that on a yearly basis or on New Year's. We can be resolved today to pursue what is good for us. Um, so think about that. Reflect on that in your life. What are some things you really want to do better? You, especially right now at this time, this is the best opportunity for you to put into practice habits that you want to carry into the future, whether work environment or life. Um, it's harder and harder. The older that you get, it's harder and harder to do that. But when you do it now, uh, if you change it now and you do it now, it's easier to maintain it. If you have any questions, if you have any issues or concerns on any of this material, feel free to contact me. Email me, message me through Canvas. Um, Catch up on everything for the next lesson, which is week 3. All the material for week 3. Be sure to this is included in the week 2 participation assignment. So be sure that you've looked at all of this. And the material from this will be reflected in the week 3 assignment. If you have any other issues, any other questions, contact me. Let me know. I hope you have a good rest of your day.